Today we're having two people making our presentation. Emma Finn and Chloë Waterman. They're both from Friends of the Climate Friendly Food Program. And today's presentation is called Opportunities for Improving the Health and Environmental Profile of School Food. I hope you got a chance to look at the newsletter. I've enjoyed reading all of the background information on our presenters, especially Chloe's was good because I was looking at the very bottom and she lives with her dog, Jackal, and a rotating cast of foster animals, and she can often be found gardening on her roof. That's the kind of person I want to listen to. So that being said, I will turn it over to them to do tonight's presentation.
All right, great. Thanks so much for having us. And Emma's going to kick things off here, but I'm going to share my screen and make sure folks can see the presentation all right.
Great. Thank you so much, Chloe. And thanks for that wonderful introduction. As mentioned, Chloe and I work for Friends of the Earth, and we are on the Climate Friendly School Food team. And so our presentation is about opportunities for improving the health and environmental profile of school food, which is our main area of work. So Friends of the Earth is a progressive environmental and social justice advocacy organization working on a variety of campaigns. It's actually a national organization, but it has an international branch and other branches around the world. We work on a variety of campaigns from climate and energy to forests and oceans. But Chloe and I work under the Food and Agriculture program. And one piece of that program is this healthy climate-friendly school food program. And in particular, we help school districts make the shift towards healthy and delicious plant-forward menus. We provide technical assistance and marketing materials to school district food service teams. We support student and community engagement strategies and really try and link school districts with the resources that they need in order to be successful. Friends of the Earth are also partners with school districts and nonprofit organizations to advocate for state and federal policy change. In my role, I provide research, analysis, and technical support to school districts in California, especially related to student and community engagement around climate-friendly school food. And for folks that might not have heard the term before, what is climate-friendly food? Well, Friends of the Earth, we define it as, in a nutshell, meaning food service that procures less and better meat. So plant-based and plant-forward foods. It also means food that is produced using sustainable production practices, such as organic or regenerative and pasture-raised. And we don't want food and packaging ending up in the landfill. So our definition of climate-friendly also emphasizes zero-waste solutions. And this has been particularly challenging, as you can imagine, during COVID for school districts especially. But we are seeing some creative and promising solutions. And there are many reasons to promote plant-forward menus for children. A big one is the fact that virtually every public health organization urges greater consumption of plant-based foods and lower red and processed meat consumption for better health outcomes. Most importantly for school food, which operates under the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the U.S. dietary guidelines reference the importance of eating more plant-based foods. So, the most recent 2020 guidelines point out that 3/4 of Americans exceed the recommendations for meat and poultry, but don't get enough nuts, seeds, and soy products. Now, on the environmental side, which is kind of where Friends of the Earth comes in, predominantly in our research capacity, is that food has a huge impact on our environment. Resource intensive meat production in particular plays a major role in driving climate change, which I know many of you might already be aware. This chart from the Environmental Protection Agency shows that nearly a quarter of all greenhouse gas emissions in the world is tied to just the production of food, which doesn't include the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the packaging, the shipping, the transport of food, or even food waste. Now, globally, livestock alone accounts for 14.5% of greenhouse gas emissions, which is more than the tailpipe emissions of all the planes, trains, cars, and trucks in the world combined. Animal foods, especially beef, have a pretty bad reputation when it comes to climate. And not all protein is created equal. So beef has 15 to 100 times the carbon footprint of beans and lentils. Animal foods also require huge amounts of water, and numerous leading scientific studies have found that we must dramatically reduce the production and consumption of industrial animal products, but also change the way in which we grow food and raise food, make those production systems more sustainable to meet climate goals. Essentially, we need to serve less and better meat. So in the US, most of our meat comes from factory farms where animals are raised in cruel, inhumane conditions. And these farms generate massive amounts of waste that also pollute our air, our water, and soil. They're also a major cause of one of our leading public health threats, the rise of antibiotic resistance. Over 80% of all antibiotics used in the US are given to farm animals. Industrial animal agriculture also has really grave implications for environmental justice. Factory farms are disproportionately located in low-wealth communities and communities of color. Residents are forced to endure noxious smells, unsafe drinking water, and pollution from factory farms in their communities. This is a quote from Naima Muhammad of the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network when she says, "People just can't ignore this. The air stinks, the water is contaminated, and property values are depleted." And so why school food? Well, because nationally, school meals have a profound impact on the health and educational outcome of students across the United States. In California, school districts spend more than $1.5 billion a year to provide 540 million school lunches to over 4 million students. And nationally, 7 billion meals are served annually. And a lot of the students that rely on school food are low-income students, students of color. So how these dollars are spent, these tax dollars are spent, and the quality of the meals has a really big impact on not only the health of these children, but also the health of the planet. And this is a graphic that is right in front of you. If it's a little bit small in the text, but perhaps it's bigger on your screen. This is from a case study we did a couple of years ago with Oakland Unified School District, where they worked really intensively over 2 years to reshape their menu with fewer animal foods and more protein-rich legumes and vegetables, which generated considerable water and climate benefits, in addition to cost savings. So they saved 42 million gallons of water, achieved a 14% reduction in the school district's carbon footprint. And they also saved $42,000. And mind you, that was with investing a lot of time and energy into making a sustainable food program. Now, a recent report that I was a part of that we released earlier this year was on the state of school lunch in California, where we analyzed the 10 most widely offered items and the relative frequency of meat and dairy-centric versus plant-based lunch entrees on the menu at the 25 largest K-12 public schools in California. We examined California's bulk food spending through the USDA Foods Program, including the companies that benefit most from the program. We also calculated the carbon footprints of the top lunch entrees and estimated the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the California School District's USDA foods bulk food purchasing. And then at the end, we made policy recommendations to better align menus with public health recommendations and on California's climate and sustainable food procurement goals. So what do we find? Perhaps unsurprisingly to many, the vast majority of school lunch entrees offered in California feature animal protein, while just 4% of entrees were plant-based. And of the animal proteins, 16% of entrees contain processed meat. That's your pepperoni, hot dogs, deli meats on school menus. But processed meats are known carcinogens according to the World Health Organization, meaning that 16% of the entrees on school lunch menus contain cancer-causing foods. The next slide is going to show you what are the top 10 entrees gleaned from California school district menus. Red meat dishes make up 4 of the 10 most frequently offered entrees, with cheeseburgers, beef crumble dishes, hot dogs, and meat pizzas being offered most frequently. The bean and cheese entrees are the only top entree in which any part of the protein requirement is fulfilled by plant protein. It's also important to point out that 3 of the most frequently offered menu items, meat pizza, hot dogs, and deli meats, contain processed meat, which is clearly out of alignment with all leading public health recommendations. Now, what about the climate impact of these meals? Well, as you can see here, the beef and cheese featured on school menus really dominate the climate impacts. In California, beef represents only 16% of the total menu offerings, but it accounts for over 60% of the carbon footprint. Meanwhile, the plant-based proteins, such as beans, tofu, and lentils, made up 4% of the entrees offered, yet represented only 1% of the carbon footprint. Many districts do provide vegetarian options, but they use cheese to fulfill the requirement, which is neither low carbon nor particularly healthy, often being high in saturated fats and sodium. The next figure compares the relative carbon footprint per serving of the top 10 entrees I showed earlier. Beef entrees by far carry the largest carbon footprint, and they're also among the most frequently offered menu items. Beef items are typically 15 times more carbon intensive than the bean and cheese entrees. Now, in addition to analyzing these school lunch menus, we looked at USDA foods purchasing data in the state of California, because USDA foods really drives what's on the menu. For example, in 2014, a study found that 70% of USDA commodity funds nationally were spent on just 4 types of foods: raw beef, mozzarella cheese, cheddar cheese, and chicken. And these 4 types of foods made up 88% of the food sent for processing, which turned into foods like the hamburgers, pizza, and chicken nuggets, all which appear frequently, as we all saw, on California school menus. According to the 2018-19 data we analyzed, California school districts spent nearly 3/4 of their USDA food dollars, totaling 115 million annually, on industrial produced animal products. Only 2% of the purchases went to plant-based foods, and beans and nut butter are the only plant-based sources of protein available. Again, this is part of the USDA foods program, of which school districts are a part. What is perhaps even more troubling is the fact that the largest meat and dairy conglomerates have really monopolized the USDA foods market. For example, Tyson Foods, the biggest meat and poultry producer in the United States, also somewhat recently in the news for exploiting workers during the pandemic, supplies 44% of all poultry purchased in California schools through USDA foods. In each of these top 4 protein categories, just 3 companies dominate 70% of the sales to California schools. And so, rather than supporting independent, local, organic producers and keeping these dollars flowing in our local economies, this tax-funded program of USDA Foods is locking school districts into supporting corporate-controlled, highly concentrated, polluting animal agriculture entities that are also dangerous and exploitative for workers. So we know that school districts function within extremely limited budgets, and they're given dollars that can only be used for USDA foods at below market rates, which incentivizes almost these kinds of purchases and puts many food service directors who are doing the best they can with limited resources in a near impossible situation. The good news is that we can change this, and many school food service directors are making important menu shifts. A lot across California that we work with are serving plant-based and plant-forward menu options, and they're doing it successfully with menu items that students love and that save the district money sometimes. Here are some recent photos of climate-friendly food in California public schools, showing that even when facing a national pandemic and food supply shortages, districts are really making climate-friendly food a reality. On the far left is the photo of a food service staff member from Ojai Unified preparing cabbage. That district actually successfully eliminated all red meat from its menus, and it continued to do so during the pandemic. The middle photo highlights, from Encinitas Union, which showed paper bags that were filled with fresh organic produce from the school's certified organic farm lab for their distance learners. And the photo on the far right shows a well-loved organic Thai basil lentil burger from San Luis Coastal Unified School District in California. The food service director, Erin Primer, spoke during one of our school food webinars about how her burger, her organic lentil burger, is really praised by both vegetarians and meat eaters alike. So much so that her plant-forward meal kits at the start of the pandemic, they were so popular that they have become the default option for all meal kits being sent home during COVID-19. And then on a positive note from our research, we found that by shifting school lunch menus, there really is a tangible way to bring change. I call this image the burger swap. It shows that if all school districts in California swapped out one beef burger for one black bean burger just once a month, it would save 220 million pounds of carbon dioxide equivalent every year. The same as taking 22,000 cars off the road, or growing 1.7 million tree seedlings over a period of time, or converting 26,000 residential solar systems for a year. And that's just one swap per month. So the key takeaways that we kind of gleaned from our research report is that while we know the school lunch program has been crucial to fighting food insecurity and meal quality has improved in recent years, our research found that there is significant misalignment with leading public health organizations' recommendations around less meat and more plants, as well as California state's climate goals and a lot of other states' climate goals as well. I also want to emphasize that our analysis was not intended to critique individuals or school districts. A lot of food service directors are doing everything they can to satisfy kids' picky eating habits, but they also have very tight budgets, strict regulations, challenging staffing situations, and inadequate kitchen facilities. But we also have new opportunities to influence school food policy. We've got a new administration in place at USDA, and child nutrition reauthorization, which is legislation in Congress that's coming up. So ultimately, the focus of our recent report, was to illuminate the policy and structural changes that are needed to better align school lunch menus with leading public health guidance and for climate science. So we really hope that we can inspire people to get more involved, sign our petitions to help advocate for climate-friendly school food policies, but also get involved on the local level. We've seen that climate-friendly food is possible. The next portion is going to be Chloë is going to be introducing how you all can, have a step-by-step approach for making change in your community.
Great, thanks, Emma. So I am going to build on what Emma shared with some ways to take this into action, both in your own community, but also for the greater policy change that we need at the federal level. So if you want to change the food in your local school, that's a great place to start. If you have a kid that goes there, if you have a grandchild, a relative, if you're a teacher, if you're involved in the school community, you're really in a good position to work to influence the food that's served at your school. So these are just 6 simple steps that we suggest for, roughly how to engage in this advocacy. So teaming up, make sure that you have students and parents in your group. Students really are such a powerful voice for change, and administrators often listen to them when they won't listen to adults in these cases. Work with your team to set a goal. Maybe you're working toward getting one plant-based option available every day. Maybe you want one day a week where only plant-based options are featured. Maybe you want to replace all of the processed meat on the menu with plant-based sources of protein. Figure out, where's your school district starting? What do the current menus look like? And what would your team consider a success? Then engage your school food service director or cafeteria manager. This is really the ultimate decision maker when it comes to school food. They're the ones that are making decisions about what to procure and what to menu. Now, understand that they're subject to a lot of regulations and a lot of barriers when it comes to cost and other sort of bureaucratic barriers. So we want to be really understanding of that and work collaboratively with them to understand what are their interests, what are their goals, and how can your goal fit in? How can you support them in doing that? You'll probably need to demonstrate community support for the change that you're trying to get. That may take the form of a letter from parents, a petition, a forum, so different emails from from parents or students to the cafeteria manager expressing support for adding plant-based options to the menu. Figure out ways to support them. Are they facing challenges with procurement? Can they not find tofu? And could you help find a tofu vendor? Are they having trouble getting the kids to eat the food? Could you offer to come in with a group and help provide taste tests to students so that they can try the foods before they eat them? Is your food service director already offering a plant-based option? Can you help promote that option? Can you, help with a marketing campaign that gets parents to send their kids to eat in the cafeteria the day that the food service director serves a plant-based option? And then just be sure to follow up and ensure implementation along the way. Just getting an item offered is the first step, but we want to make sure the kids eat it, that it's cost effective for the food service director, that the staff are prepared to be able to serve it. So it's a big puzzle. There's a lot of pieces to work out. You're going to be more or less successful depending on who the food service director is, how supportive they are. But with these steps, we've seen many communities be successful in making change. I also wanted to share a little bit about a new federal bill that was actually just introduced earlier this week. Representatives Bowman and Velasquez introduced the Healthy Future Students and Earth Pilot Program Act. This bill will establish a new $10 million pilot grants program to support school districts in offering more plant-based entree and milk options to students. It prioritizes funding for low-income school districts, and it emphasizes providing culturally appropriate menus. Schools that voluntarily apply for grants under this program can use that funding for culinary training and technical assistance, for procurement costs of plant-based sources of protein from socially disadvantaged producers, that's Black, Indigenous, other farmers of color, women, beginning and veteran farmers, as well as from local farms. Funding can also be used for marketing and student engagement, making sure that the kids are engaged, that they like the food, it's marketed in a way that appeals to them. It can also cover additional labor costs, and sometimes preparing, especially scratch cooked plant-based options, can come with additional labor costs. And it can provide for nutrition education, making sure that students understand, have that connection between the classroom and the cafeteria. Here are a few actions that folks could take if you are interested in supporting the Healthy Future Students in Earth Act. You can write to your U.S. representative, ask them to co-sponsor the bill, follow up with a phone call, write a letter to the editor of your local paper expressing your support and why it matters to you and your community. Finding a student or a parent, someone with a direct stake in school food is often the best voice to write letters, a letter to the editor like this. See if your food service director will weigh in support of the bill with your member of Congress. Their voice really matters. And if they reach out to your member of Congress and say, hey, I saw that this grant program is being proposed, this would really help our program, that is going to really have an impact on your member of Congress. And then you can also meet with your US representative. You can meet with their DC folks on Zoom. Pretty soon we may be back to having in-district meetings, gather a group together, have a meeting. That's really the most effective thing that you can do, leveraging your power as a voter and as a constituent within your own community, gathering people from your community, making your voice heard directly to the person elected to represent you in Congress. So we just wanted to close with a few resources, and we can make sure that John has the links to these to share, but we have a fact sheet for the bill, a little bit more of a guide on how to be an effective citizen lobbyist and have a good meeting with your legislator, and then a school lunch toolkit for change. We will also share the report that Emma mentioned and reviewed, and here are our emails. If folks have any questions or want to follow up with us after the presentation, we'd be happy to chat. And that is all we have.
Very, very good. Got a couple questions that aren't addressed to anyone specific. So I see what you're doing in the California schools. Is there anything like that going on in either Oregon or Washington?
Sure. So there are some groups that I would check out. There's Oregon Green Schools and Washington Green Schools. They work more broadly, not, climate friendly food is just one part of what they touch, but we've partnered with both of those groups in the past, and they both have interest in climate friendly food and are more local. So I definitely suggest checking those groups out. We have done a little bit of work with Portland Public Schools, or I have in particular. And we've held a forum with the Portland Public Schools food service director and about 80 students and parents. And that was a great way, I think, for her to hear directly from the community that demand for more plant-based options. And they did add plant-based options as a result of that advocacy. But then the pandemic hit and it kind of put a damper on that work. And so that was challenging for a lot of food service directors. So, we really need to get back in touch, or if there are parents who happen to be listening to this presentation that have a tie-in with Portland Public Schools, would love to get in touch with them and be able to reinvigorate these efforts.
Very good. You answered the next question at working with local schools. Do you have any kind of examples of some of the goals and such that were set? And it sounds like some of those you have on those links, so we'll make sure and share those. We also had a presentation here a couple of months ago from a group out of Roseburg, Oregon, that are trying to make that area a blue zone. And it was talking about the different kinds of things that they had been doing with the schools and the school lunches, and a lot of pushback they were getting. So,
oh, interesting.
I'm gonna provide some of this information to them. Maybe that they'll be getting a hold of you.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed to hear about the healthy food bill. I think that's one that we can do a lot to promote and push. So that's very good. All right. I don't seem to have any other questions. But and we probably ought to let Emma be able to go
That's true.
decent sleep tonight.
Oh, that's sweet.
Anyway, I want to thank you very, very much. This, you know, I don't think we've really thought that much about the next generation, which is our kids, and what they're getting and what they're eating at school. And so this was a very interesting, very important topic to produce right now. So I really do thank you. We will be sharing this with everyone that registered, and I'll be getting a copy of it back to you.
Great, our pleasure. Thanks so much for having us.